And here we are for another edition of Web Chat with the Mayor. It is June and approaching the first council meeting here in this month. And Pat, we are looking at future uses for the old Hunter Street Art Gallery. And so what is the recommendation coming forward this Thursday night?
Staff is coming forward with a recommendation that we ask Economic Development to look at finding a tenant to lease the building. One of the options, of course, you could sell the building, but strategically, being next door to the library, if we ever looked at expanding, that would be obviously a place that the library could expand to. So it's a strategic piece of real estate. So we will look for a tenant. We're now in a position to also decide the amount of work that we want to do on the outside of the building to shore up the heritage features. And depending on the tenant that comes in, there might be small renovations on the inside. But basically, it's a strategic decision. It's an important piece of real estate. But let's see if we can find a tenant to go into it.
Yeah, when you say tenant, I mean, what sort of use would you be, renting it out to someone who's going to live there? Or would this be, some sort of institution or business? Or what is the thought there?
I would suspect that it'll be institutional, office space. That's probably the highest and best use. I know back when we've had people I know have approached me wondering if it comes up for sale, that they'd be interested in it. And so they represent both commercial interests and both agencies who would be interested in the building. So we think there's a market for it.
Well, I mean, if you've had people approach you, interested in buying it, why not just sell it rather than lease it?
Well, again, we could sell it, but then what do we do if the library ever expands? And one of the things when we did our studies in the past, because we're still a small community, driving distance is not an issue. So do you expand the current library, or would you build a second library in the other parts of the city? Well, if you build a second library, then you've got a whole staffing component you have to come up to. So strategically, once the library is becoming very successful, they're not to the point yet where they're thinking expansion, but it can't be that far down the road. And this is, like I said, a strategic piece of real estate for them.
All right. Now, you were at a meeting yesterday, I guess a regional meeting, and dealing with the OLG, and of course they're making some sweeping changes. And were you able to learn anything new yesterday about the impact of those changes here in Woodstock?
There was again information that's coming out. Basically, they've just been at these meetings. They keep saying the same things over and over again, but they keep fleshing out a little more detail. One of the big things was a concern that they're turning them over to the private sector, and a concern from the people in Chatham-Kent, where Dresden is, would be the same concern as I have. What happens if these gaming companies decide not to bid on our territory? But we were pretty much left with assurances that there are people who are interested in the Toronto market, but there's also gaming operations that are interested in small centers too. So that made me feel better. Certainly, they went through the process of where municipalities would have to get involved to show their interest in continuing to be a host city. But as far as the revenue component, there's an upcoming meeting of the mayors in Milton that's been on the books for a while, for June 21st, where we'll have our first glimpse at the compensation that communities can expect from a gaming operation. So that by the time the fall comes around, the OLG is conscious that municipalities have to start their budgeting process, and so they should have some idea as to what the revenue is. Woodstock's in the enviable position is that we take our money from the slots and we sort of bank it for a year. So here in 2012, we're spending our 2011 revenue. But there's a lot of other communities that, London, for example, they're spending it as soon as they get it in. So for those communities, it's important to get a sense as to the amount of money they can expect.
Are we expecting to get about the same, or is that still an unknown at this point?
Well, again, the hope of the Lottery Corporation is, as they work through the structure, that they've indicated a number of times that they expect that the municipalities' revenues should be in line with what they're receiving now. when I look at that, when you look at the numbers and everything else, it seems like the commission that's paid to municipalities will decrease. But again, there might be more gaming machines inside. But overall, the amount of money that comes in is to remain fairly constant.
Okay, so we could see more machines then.
We could see more machines. It's very unlikely that we'll see a full gaming operations, casinos, and with the tables and everything else. I just don't think that fits in with the small market in Woodstock.
Okay, very good. The other thing that caught my eye on the agenda for this Thursday's meeting is that we're going to allow some more tickets to be issued, I guess, at the Woodstock Hospital. There's some parking issues ongoing at the new hospital.
Yes, the city has bylaws related to parking and traffic, but mostly parking. And so the hospital had come to the city and said, "Look, can you enforce, bring city bylaws onto private property?" And so we passed a motion. But of course, bylaws are only as good as the enforcement. And so hospital officials said, we put these in place because we want traffic to move and such a thing. And the reality is with Woodstock, with 2 bylaw officers, they would get up there maybe once a week for an hour at best, which kind of defeats the purpose. And so the hospital has approached the city to say, look, can we use the security company that we have on contract with us, and can we seek permission for them to issue tickets that are violating our rules on our private property? And so council will be asked to give the blessing to that. The security team up there will be trained by our bylaw officers to understand the rules, but they'll be able to issue tickets, and because they're 24/7, the hospital has better assurances that the rules they put in place to control the things that they've asked the city to do, they'll make sure that the enforcement's there. Once a ticket's issued, it just then falls into the normal process of any other ticket. But the key thing is the security firm will be able to issue tickets, but they can only issue it on that hospital site.
Okay, very good. Thanks for your time today, Pat, and we'll hear more about these and other issues coming up Thursday night at Woodstock City Council.